It's 2010 and two Nobel laureates are trying to answer the age-old question, does money buy happiness? They're not the first to research this topic, but their results quickly take the world by storm. It's one of the most cited psychology papers of the 2010s. It's been featured in news segments, TED Talks, TV shows. You might have even heard of it pop up randomly in conversation.
Have you guys heard of that study where it's like happiness peaks after $75,000? Oh, okay.
But here's the thing, the study's wrong, and it's not just me saying that. One of the authors revisited the data more than 10 years later and realized they made a crucial mistake in their analysis. But to understand where they went wrong, first let's unpack that initial study and see if you can guess where they made their mistake. To begin their analysis, Kahneman and Deaton divide happiness into two categories, emotional well-being and life evaluation. Emotional well-being is the day-to-day emotional quality of an individual's life. How frequent and intense are experiences of happiness, enjoyment, smiling, and laughter, what the authors call positive affect, or experiences of worry and sadness, blue affect, or something else like stress or anger. Life evaluation is the thoughts that people have about their life when they really think about it. How satisfied are you with your life as a whole these days is one of the most commonly asked questions to determine life evaluation. So basically, emotional well-being is happiness on a micro scale and life evaluation is happiness on a macro scale. While most well-being surveys focus on life evaluation, Kahneman and Deaton use data from Gallup's Well-Being Index, the same organization that produces the World Happiness Report every year. This data gives them access to both emotional well-being and life evaluation for hundreds of thousands of Americans. To measure emotional well-being, Gallup asked respondents yes or no questions on how people felt yesterday, like did you feel enjoyment, did you feel happiness, what about anger, sadness, stress, or worry? Life evaluation was measured by having respondents rate their current life on a scale where 0 is the worst possible life for you and 10 is the best possible life for you, also known as Cantrell's ladder. Now, the main purpose of this paper was to look at the relationship between happiness and income. But Kahneman and Deaton also looked at how happiness was related to other variables. Some of these are kinda obvious, like respondents who answered on weekends had much higher happiness, in particular less stress, physical illness, headaches, being alone all day, smoking, and caring for an adult all had negative effects on emotional well-being and life evaluation, but they were far worse for emotional well-being. And I'd imagine the results would be much worse if you did all of those at the same time. College graduates have higher life evaluation than non-college graduates, but are also much more stressed. Religious people had higher positive affect and lower stress. Women have high positive affect as well, high life evaluation, but also more stress and more blue affect than people who aren't women. Having children at home increases stress, sadness, and worry. And finally, older people have higher emotional well-being, in particular less stress and less anger. Yeah, pretty interesting results, especially the part about women experiencing higher stress. Am I right, ladies? Yeah. Anyway, on to the main findings of the paper. When we plot three measures of emotional well-being against income, we get three curves that share a similar shape. What we can infer is that people with lower incomes have, on average, worse emotional well-being than those with higher incomes. But for those at the higher end of income, their emotional well-being doesn't differ that much from each other, as if they reach some kind of emotional plateau, and the point at which it plateaus is $75,000. This is in contrast to when the results of the average Cantrell's ladder score is plotted against income, a fairly steady rise in life evaluation as income rises. So that's how we reached the famous number, $75,000. You probably didn't hear about the Cantrell's ladder score continuing to rise with income, and only ever heard about happiness plateauing at $75,000. That's okay, I didn't either. Someone who did hear about it was Matthew Killingsworth from the University of Pennsylvania. Killingsworth, like many Kahneman fans before him, read the original 2010 paper and was impressed by the results. But he had a particular issue with the data that made him decide to conduct his own study. Was Killingsworth's issue with the data the same as what you think Kahneman and Deaton's mistake was? Find out now. Did you experience the following feelings during a lot of the day yesterday? Killingsworth had an issue with the way emotional well-being data was collected, in particular the yesterday part. The problem with using remembered feelings as a proxy for emotional well-being is that they're vulnerable to memory errors and biases in judgment, and this raises potential issues with conflation. Think about it like this: remembering how you feel over a specific time period invokes a similar thought process to how you would evaluate your life. So when answering questions on emotional well-being, someone might subconsciously provide an answer that aligns closer to life evaluation than to emotional well-being. If we take this issue to the extreme, this means that remembered feelings has a relationship with life evaluation, not emotional well-being. This creates the possibility that even if our data shows a relationship between income and remembered feelings and emotional well-being doesn't have a relationship. So there's no way to conclude that income and emotional well-being has a relationship. On the other end of potential issues, there's also the possibility that remembered feelings introduces noise or other forms of bias that, for some reason, artificially mutes emotional well-being's relationship with income. In this case, emotional well-being actually has a stronger relationship with income than what was previously found. Basically, the relationship between income and emotional well-being could be a lot stronger or a lot weaker than what Kahneman and Deaton originally found, and this raises the possibility of a plateau existing elsewhere or not at all. So to get around using remembered feelings, Killingsworth collected real-time reports of emotional well-being using an app he created called Track Your Happiness. This type of data is called experience sampling. At a random point in the day, the app would ping the user and ask, "How do you feel right now?" And the respondent would answer using a continuous response scale. To track life evaluation, the app also asked, "Overall, how satisfied are you with your life?" And the respondent would respond the same way. In 2021, Killingsworth published his results and found that larger incomes were consistently associated with better life evaluation, just like what Kahneman and Deaton originally found. But unlike the original findings, Killingsworth also found this to be true with emotional well-being, a relationship that was strikingly linear, as he called it. There was no plateau in emotional well-being at $75,000 or at any other income level. In fact, if you split the data in half and calculated their slopes, you'll see that they're basically the same. Now, was this due to more positive feelings or less negative feelings? According to the data, both. No plateau to be found here either. Killingsworth's findings aren't as widespread as Kahneman and Deaton's, but it does eventually capture Kahneman's attention, who is eager to work with him. What they find is, yes, the original study did make a crucial mistake in its analysis, but it's not what Killingsworth originally thought. And not only that, they found that Killingsworth also made a mistake in his analysis as well. Throughout his career, Kahneman practiced an approach called adversarial collaboration. If two researchers had differing conclusions, Kahneman thought that they should work together to resolve the differences, rather than antagonize each other. And so, Kahneman reached out to Killingsworth, and with Barbara Mellers as a facilitator, the three attempted to resolve the conflicting results. The first step of the collaboration was assuming both data sets were valid. Could there be a reality in which the conclusions of both papers were correct? Turns out there is. But not before acknowledging the errors both authors made in their analysis. The crucial mistake that Kahneman and Deaton made was incorrectly interpreting the data by Gallup. Positive affect was measured by asking 3 yes or no questions. Did you smile or laugh a lot yesterday? Did you feel happiness a lot yesterday? And did you feel enjoyment a lot yesterday? The problem lies with them being yes-no questions. Specifically, the problem is called a ceiling effect. The happiest person in the world would answer yes to all 3 of those questions, but so would a regular happy person. And because of how the questions are designed, there's no way to distinguish between the two. The higher level of happiness that the first person experiences isn't captured by the survey, as if there's some sort of ceiling limiting their response. And a lot of high-income people answered yes to all 3 of those questions. Around 89% in positive affect and 81% not in blue affect. So if the original study couldn't differentiate between the different levels of happiness, this means that it actually works better as a study of unhappiness. The conclusion isn't happiness rises with income, then plateaus at $75,000. It's unhappiness falls with income, then plateaus at $75,000. The implication now is that there exists a subset of unhappy people who are always unhappy, even with higher incomes. And to confirm if this is true, we need data that isn't limited by a ceiling effect. And this is where Killingsworth's data comes in. Remember, Killingsworth collected his data using a continuous scale from very good to very bad. bad, so it isn't limited by a ceiling effect. This is why the chart showing the relationship between emotional well-being and income was strikingly linear. To test the new conclusion of the original study, Kahneman and Killingsworth split the data into 5 quantiles of happiness. If the new conclusion is true, the lower quantiles, which represent the unhappiest of society, should experience a plateau at higher incomes. And this is exactly what they saw. At the 15th percentile of happiness, happiness in the higher incomes plateaus from about $100,000. $100,000 being the updated number due to inflation. Going up the quantiles of happiness, this plateau disappears, just like what Killingsworth originally found. What is surprising, however, is that for the happiest of people, more income is associated with even more happiness, a result not found in Killingsworth's original paper. The mistake that Killingsworth made was assuming that his data was homogeneous. In this context, this is assuming that the relationship between happiness and income is the same for all levels of happiness. If Killingsworth hadn't assumed this, he would have found the plateau in happiness for the unhappiest cohort of people, and the accelerating increase in happiness for the happiest cohort of people. And so, through adversarial collaboration and recognizing initial mistakes, the conflicting results of both papers ended up being resolved. And in a way, both papers did end up being correct. But at the same time, also incorrect. So to answer the question that the 3 papers initially set out to ask, can money buy happiness? Yes, but only if you have some level of happiness outside of money. If you're rich but in the unhappiest cohort of people, more money isn't associated with more happiness. If you're rich and in the average cohort of happiness, more money is associated with more happiness. But if you're rich and in the happiest cohort of people, more money is associated with even more happiness. But also, money doesn't buy that much happiness. For all levels of happiness, the difference in happiness level isn't that much compared to the differences in income. Killingsworth's data is represented by a 100-point scale. If we just looked at the median level of happiness, the difference in happiness between an income of $15,000 and $250,000 is like 4. Yes, money is important to happiness, but so are other things. Get a hobby, love your family, subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching this video, and thanks to all of these people here for helping me produce this video. And click on this video right here if you want to watch more videos on economics. Thank you. Also please subscribe. Goodbye.